The galaxy had forgotten humanity. On the official records of most empires, the species was barely a footnote. Primitive, aggressive, self-destructive. Some archives even listed them as extinct, wiped out by their own endless wars. So when a single human cadet stepped off the transport shuttle and into the glittering heart of Crucible Station, the gathered crowd of alien recruits erupted in laughter. The hangar was a cathedral of steel and starlight, banners of every major empire draped across towering walls. Dozens of species stood in their ranks, scaled warriors from the Dominion, crystalline tacticians from the Sheer, hulking war beasts of the Brakeith. Each represented a culture with centuries of military history. And then, there was Elias Ward. A man. Just a man. He carried no shining carapace, no claws, no genetic enhancements. His frame was lean, his uniform hanging just a little loose. His face, unlike the others, carried no natural armor or strange alien ridges. Only scars. Old, thin scars across his knuckles and jawline that whispered of a life already lived. The jeers began immediately. Is that it? That's a human? Bones wrapped in meat. Relic of a dead world. Some cadets mimicked the way he walked, clumsy and heavy compared to the gliding movements of their kind. Others hissed, calling him animal, feral, primitive. But Elias said nothing. He didn't rise to the insults, didn't argue, didn't explain. Instead, he studied them the way a hunter studies prey, quietly, intently. His eyes moved from species to species, noting how they carried themselves, where their weight shifted, how they boasted with overconfidence. That silence unnerved them, more than if he'd shouted. The commanding officer, a towering Brakeith drill master, silenced the crowd with a growl. Order. This station will forge warriors, not chatterers. If the human fails, he fails. If he survives, he survives. The training began. Alien cadets sprinted through gravity drills, their bodies adapted to planets with crushing atmospheres. They leapt impossible distances in low-G chambers. They bent steel with their augmented limbs. And Elias struggled. He gasped through the weighted sprints. His arms trembled under the strain of lifts designed for alien musculature. Sweat poured, his chest heaving raggedly while others mocked him. But where most faltered once, Elias always finished. Bruised, bleeding, sometimes last, but never quitting. And with every failure he learned. Adjusted. Observed. During combat simulations, the laughter grew louder. Elias faced off against opponents twice his size. His punches seemed like whispers against armored hides. Every knockdown ended with him sprawled across the floor. Yet every time he stood again, eyes sharp, memorizing, calculating. One night in the barracks, a crystalline Shire cadet sneered, "Why do you keep trying, human? You're nothing here. You should have stayed dead with your kind." Elias met. His gaze only for a moment, then turned away without answering. That single refusal, choosing silence over rage, spread unease like wildfire. It wasn't weakness, it was patience, and patience was alien to them. The truth was this. Crucible Station had seen thousands of cadets over the years, brutes who relied on strength, strategists who leaned on logic, but they had never seen eyes like Elias Ward's. Eyes that didn't shine with arrogance or pride, only a steady, unsettling focus. He wasn't here to prove himself. He was here to watch, to wait, and deep down, though none of them admitted it, the alien cadets felt a shift in the air around him, like the faint rumble before a coming storm, because sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy isn't the warrior who shows his teeth, it's the one who doesn't. The training arena was alive with noise. Hundreds of cadets filled the stands, their voices a chaotic roar of languages that echoed against steel walls and shimmering energy fields. Above them, banners of empires waved proudly, as if each species had already claimed victory before the match began. In the center stood the challenger, Veil Dominion champion, a towering insectoid whose carapace gleamed like obsidian. His body was a fortress of muscle and chitin, forearms tipped with claws sharp enough to shred metal. He raised his limbs high, mandibles snapping as the crowd erupted in anticipation. The announcer's voice thundered, "Combat trial! Dominion, champion versus human cadet Elias Ward." A wave of laughter swept the stands. Some cadets slapped their knees, others hissed insults, and more than a few leaned forward eager to watch blood. From the opposite gate, Elias stepped barefoot onto the arena floor. His boots had been stripped for the match. Some alien joke about letting him fight like the primitive beast he was. He carried no weapon, no armor, only the standard training uniform clinging to his lean frame. The Dominion warrior loomed over him, a mountain of claws and rage. Elias didn't flinch. His eyes didn't widen. He just stood there, still as stone. "Pathetic mammal," the insectoid hissed through the translator. "You'll bleed fast." The bell struck. The champion lunged, claws slicing air with lethal precision. The crowd roared, certain it would end in seconds. But Elias moved. Not faster than the alien, but differently. He ducked low, sliding just beneath the swing. Dust scattered as claws tore into the floor where his head had been. The crowd gasped. The champion snarled and came again, faster this time. A heavy strike from the left, dodged. A sweeping leg to crush ribs, avoided by a backward roll. Elias didn't attack. He didn't even raise his fists. He studied. Every feint, every twitch, every moment of overconfidence etched into his mind. The audience grew restless. Some shouted, "Fight, human! Stand still and die!" But Elias ignored them. His breathing was measured, calm, his eyes cold. Then came the mistake. The insectoid reared back with all four arms, a telegraphed strike fueled by frustration. Elias didn't retreat this time. He stepped in. Just one step, but it was enough. His shoulder crashed against the alien's center of gravity. Momentum shifted. The Dominion warrior stumbled forward, balance broken. Before the crowd could blink, Elias hooked his foot around one of the insectoid's limbs and wrenched. The alien's massive body toppled with a thunderous crash that shook the arena floor. Silence. The champion scrambled to rise, rage burning in his compound eyes. But Elias was already there. A strike to the joint, a twist of an arm against its natural hinge, a stomp against the base of a claw. The insectoid howled, thrashing, but Elias's movements were surgical, precise, brutal, efficient. The crowd wasn't laughing anymore. And then, Elias stopped. He stood over the Dominion warrior, chest heaving, one hand still raised to deliver the finishing blow. His eyes swept across the audience, meeting their stares. For a heartbeat, no one moved. He lowered his hand, turned, walked away. The insectoid lay gasping on the arena floor, not defeated by brute force, but by the unthinkable. By psychology, by patience, by the mind of a species everyone thought extinct. The silence of the crowd was heavier than their earlier laughter. They had come expecting a spectacle, a slaughter. Instead, they had witnessed something worse. Proof. Proof that the human wasn't fragile prey, but something terrifyingly adaptable. Some cadets whispered, "He tricked him." Others murmured, "He's not stronger, he's smarter." But all of them felt the same creeping chill. It wasn't that Elias had won. It was how he had done it. Calm, calculated, merciless. As he left the arena, the alien eyes that once mocked him now tracked him with unease. Whispers spread like sparks through dry grass. For the first time, Crucible Station wondered if this was what one human could do. What would billions be capable of? The station didn't sleep that night. Crucible's corridors, usually buzzing with laughter, training chants, and the clatter of boots, were different now. Quieter. Uneasy. The match replayed across holoscreens in endless loops. Elias Ward, the human, standing calm as a Dominion warrior, writhed at his feet. In every mess hall, every barrack, whispers carried. Did you see his eyes? He enjoyed it. No. He planned it, every move. That wasn't instinct, that was predatory. My brother fought humans during the quarantine wars. He said they fight like demons. I thought he was lying. The more the story spread, the less it sounded like rumor and the more it felt like prophecy. In the officer's wing, a group of cadets from the crystalline Shire species reviewed ancient archives. They hadn't been opened in centuries, files tagged with red warnings labeled "Humanity Quarantined." Holograms flickered to life, showing battles long buried by history. Humans in primitive armor, wielding crude rifles, fighting enemies that dwarfed them in strength and technology. And yet, winning. Not by numbers, not by firepower, by desperation, by refusing to die. One Shire cadet whispered, almost to himself. They burned their own cities to starve invaders, poisoned their skies just to deny an enemy foothold. No other race would do that. No other race could. His crystalline form shivered, cracks forming along his edges. This Elias, he's not an exception. He's a reminder. Meanwhile, in the lower barracks, the Dominion cadets tended to their humiliated champion. His claws were splintered, his pride shattered. He raged against his healers, mandibles clacking furiously. "He didn't beat me," he screamed. "He tricked me, like prey luring a predator into a trap." But no one met his eyes, not even his own kind, because they had all seen it. The human hadn't just fought. He had studied, as though violence was a language, and Elias Ward was fluent. Elias himself sat alone, perched on the edge of his bunk. He didn't celebrate, he didn't gloat. He simply sharpened a training blade in slow, steady strokes, the sound of metal scraping stone echoing in the silent dorm. A Brakeith cadet, the hulking, wolfish kind who feared nothing, entered and froze at the sight. For the first time in his life, the Brakeith didn't taunt or laugh. He just nodded stiffly and left. Even the fearless now avoided him. The paranoia spread upward. In the command tower, instructors and generals reviewed combat footage. They replayed every frame. Elias's calm stance, his precision, the way he let the Dominion warrior exhaust himself before striking. "This wasn't luck," one officer growled. "That was strategy." Another adjusted her hologram. "If he's representative of his species, we've made a mistake letting him in." A silence fell over the room, because every one of them was thinking the same forbidden thought. If one human could humiliate a Dominion champion, what could an army of them do? By dawn, Crucible Station felt different. The cafeteria line grew quiet when Elias entered. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Trays clattered nervously. Cadets shifted away, giving him space he hadn't asked for. Eyes followed him everywhere, wide with unease. He ate slowly, deliberately, as though he didn't notice. But he did. He noticed everything, and that was what terrified them most. Because arrogance was familiar. Strength was predictable. But Elias Ward wasn't arrogant, and he wasn't showing off strength. He was simply waiting, watching. And though no one admitted it aloud, every cadet felt the same thing gnawing at their gut, that this wasn't just about one fight. This was the beginning of something larger, something that history had tried to bury. Later that night, the whispers returned. Louder, darker. I heard the generals are reopening sealed human war files. I heard they're considering sending him back to Earth. No, worse. I heard they're wondering if they should kill him before others arrive. The corridors echoed not with laughter anymore, but with fear. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy was remembering the species they had written off as extinct. The predators who thrived in chaos, the humans, and it all began with Elias Ward. The order came at dawn. Elias Ward was to report to the command spire, the highest tower on Crucible Station, where cadets were never invited, only summoned. The elevator hummed as it climbed, glass walls revealing the sprawl of the station below. Training. Arenas, weapons ranges, and the gleaming ships docked in orbit. Elias watched them all without expression, hands clasped behind his back. When the doors opened, the air changed. Thicker. Heavier. The chamber was circular, lit only by the cold glow of suspended holoscreens. Around the table sat the generals of Crucible, beings who had led campaigns across star systems, who commanded fleets larger than anything humanity had ever dreamed. Their eyes were fixed on him, not curious, not dismissive, but wary. The Bracketh. General, a beast of iron fur and glowing eyes, growled first. So, the human arrives. Elias didn't flinch. He stepped forward, boots striking the floor with measured precision. Cadet Elias Ward reporting as ordered. The crystalline, sheer general shifted, her form refracting the light like broken glass. Do you know why you are here? Elias let the silence hang. Then, because your cadets cannot stop whispering. A murmur rippled through the chamber. His words struck harder than a shout. The insectoid Dominion general slammed a clawed fist onto the table. You humiliated one of ours. You turned a combat trial into a farce. That alone warrants your expulsion. Elias's gaze moved to him, steady, unblinking. I didn't humiliate him. He humiliated himself by thinking brute force was enough. The words echoed. Even the air systems seemed to hesitate. Finally, the sheer general tilted her head. Your species, it was thought extinct. Yet here you stand and the footage of your duel spreads across the empires. You must understand what that means. I understand, Elias said evenly. It means you're afraid. The Bracketh general bared his fangs. Afraid? Of you? Elias stepped closer, shadows from the hololights painting his face in stark lines. Not of me. Of what I represent. He let his eyes sweep across them all. Deliberate. Controlled. You think I'm dangerous? I'm just one man. Imagine billions. The chamber fell into silence. A silence that stretched, suffocating, as each general absorbed the weight of those words. The Dominion general hissed. Billions like you would burn the galaxy. Elias's voice was soft but sharper than any blade. Billions like me already did. You just forgot. One of the younger officers, a scaled strategist from the Cathari, finally spoke, his voice trembling despite himself. Why do you fight this way? With no hesitation, no restraint. Elias's jaw tightened. His answer was calm, but his eyes flickered with something deeper. Because my species was born in fire. Every war we fought on our own soil. Every enemy we faced with nothing but desperation and will. To us, survival is not glory. It's instinct. The Shire general whispered almost reverently. Predators, the Bracketh general growled. No, not predators, monsters. Elias finally broke eye contact, looking toward the holoscreens displaying Crucible Station. Fleets, cadets, war machines, order, discipline, structure. All of it built to control chaos. And then softly he said, You don't understand. Chaos is where we live. The generals shifted uneasily. They were veterans of countless wars, yet none had seen a cadet stand in their chamber and speak as though he was the one judging them. Finally, the Shire general dismissed him. You may return to training, human, but know this. We are watching you. Elias bowed slightly, a gesture that wasn't submission but acknowledgement. I know, he said. That's the problem. He turned and walked out, boots echoing in the chamber. The doors sealed behind him with a hiss. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the Bracketh general exhaled heavily. One human, and already the galaxy trembles. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any roar. The alarms came without warning. A piercing siren split the silence of Crucible Station, its crimson lights strobing across corridors and casting shadows that danced like predators on the walls. Cadets spilled into the hallways, half-dressed, shouting in confusion. Automated warnings blared in a dozen alien tongues, but the message was the same. Outer defenses breached. Pirate fleet inbound. From the observation deck, the void was alive with fire. Sleek raider ships darted between Crucible's defense turrets, loosing volleys of plasma that lit the black with burning streaks. Explosions blossomed across the docking bays. Shuttles tumbled into space like burning meteors. Panic hit the cadets instantly. The Dominion warriors roared, demanding orders. The sheer cadets clustered in groups, arguing in cold logic that dissolved under the weight of fear. The Bryceth beat their chests, ready to charge, but with no direction. Their strength meant nothing. Elias Ward stood in the chaos, silent as ever, watching, measuring. When the first impact rocked the station, sending cadets sprawling across the deck, the chain of command cracked. Instructors barked conflicting orders. Systems overloaded, comms collapsed under panicked traffic. That's when Elias moved. He didn't shout, didn't plead for calm. He acted. Seal corridors 4 through 7. He snapped, voice cutting, through the chaos. Divert power from training arenas to shields. You, Bryceth, hold that bulkhead, now. For a heartbeat, the cadets hesitated. Why listen to a human? Then the second impact struck. Fire roared through a shattered viewport. Cadets screamed. And still, Elias didn't falter. He grabbed a Dominion cadet by the arm, dragging him toward a control panel. Override the failsafes, now. Use your claws. Pry it open. The insectoid obeyed without thinking. Bit by bit, order began to form around him. Not because he was in command, but because he wasn't afraid. While the others froze, Elias moved with the calm precision of someone who had lived in chaos his entire life. In the control spire, generals watched through surveillance feeds, disbelief written on their faces. Who gave him authority? One barked. No one, another whispered. He's just doing it, and they couldn't deny the truth. The human was succeeding where their training had failed. On the lower decks, the fighting began. Pirate boarding craft slammed into the station, disgorging raiders in jagged armor. Cadets faltered, unprepared. For real combat, plasma fire seared the walls. Cries of pain echoed through the corridors. Elias was already there. Ambush routes, he barked, dragging overturned tables into choke points. High ground, now. He shoved a sheer cadet up, onto a platform, positioning him like a sniper. Cover the choke, don't miss. When the pirates surged through the breached corridor, they expected panic. Instead, they met crossfire. Plasma bolts cut them down, their charge collapsing into chaos. Elias moved among the cadets, not just commanding but fighting, improvised, weapons in his hands striking with brutal efficiency. A raider lunged at him with a blade of serrated steel. Elias caught the arm, twisted until bone cracked, and drove the pirate's own weapon into his throat. The cadets froze, stunned, not by the kill, but by how natural it looked, as if the human had been born for this. Minutes stretched into hours. The station groaned under relentless assault. Fires burned unchecked in some sectors. Yet where Elias fought, the cadets didn't break. His calm was infectious, his ruthlessness a shield stronger than steel. By the time reinforcements from the station's fleet arrived, the pirates were already faltering. Their raid, meant to scatter frightened cadets, had instead met the most terrifying force imaginable. Organized resistance led by a single human. The last pirate ship disengaged, limping into the void. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of flames and the ragged breathing of survivors. Elias stood among them, his uniform torn, his arms streaked with blood, some his, most not. He looked at the cadets around him, their eyes wide with something new, not mockery, not disdain, respect, and fear. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. He simply said, "This isn't over. They'll be back. Next time, be ready." And with that, he walked away, leaving silence in his wake. The smoke hadn't even cleared before the second wave came. Sirens howled, bulkheads groaned, new signatures bled across the hollow screens, pirate reinforcements, larger ships this time, their hulls bristling with weapons. They hadn't fled in defeat. They had retreated to regroup, and now they were coming back to finish it. The station quaked under fresh impacts. Shields faltered, generals screamed conflicting orders over comms. Cadets scrambled like cornered prey, fear clawing at every face except one. Elias Ward's eyes narrowed. His voice cut through the panic. "They won't stop unless we stop them." A Bracketh cadet snarled, his claws trembling. "We're not trained for this. We hold the station and wait." Elias shook his head. "No. Hold the station, and we die. Here. The only way to survive is to hit them where they live, on their ships." The suggestion was madness. Cadets stared in disbelief. Board enemy vessels? With what? With who? But Elias was already moving. He strapped on a raider's fallen armor still slick with blood. His hands moved fast, efficient, scavenging explosives from shattered corridors, fashioning traps out of stripped wires and fuel cells. "Those who want to live," he growled, "come with me." And to their own surprise, they followed. The boarding craft was a stolen pirate shuttle, its hull scorched and cracked. Cadets crammed inside, their eyes darting nervously. The engines roared, flinging them into the void. Through the viewport, the pirate fleet loomed, jagged monsters of metal against the stars. No battle hymns, no grand speeches, just Elias, his jaw set like stone. "This isn't a drill," he said. "This is survival. On that ship, you don't fight like soldiers, you fight like predators, no mercy, no hesitation. You stop thinking about rules and start thinking about what they fear most, us." The shuttle slammed into a raider frigate with bone-rattling force. The hull screeched as the docking clamps bit in. Sparks showered the cabin. "Move," Elias roared. The hatch blew open. Smoke and fire spilled into the pirate vessel. The human led the charge. The first corridor became a slaughterhouse. Pirates surged forward, blades raised, but Elias was already among them. He ducked a plasma shot, drove a knife up under a raider's ribs, then used the body as a shield against the next volley. His movements weren't elegant. They were vicious, efficient, human. Behind him, cadets fought harder than they ever had. Fear twisted into fury, driven by the sight of the human tearing through their enemies like he had been born for this. They didn't just fight. They adapted, using debris as shields, traps as weapons, turning the pirates' own ship into a labyrinth of ambushes. Elias rigged fuel lines with stolen detonators. Every explosion shook the frigate, cutting off pirate reinforcements, driving panic into the raider ranks. One pirate, massive and scarred, charged with a cleaver-like blade. Elias didn't dodge. He sidestepped, hooked the raider's arm, and slammed his head into a bulkhead with such force the metal dented. The pirate slid down, lifeless. The cadets froze for a moment, stunned by the brutality. Elias just wiped the blood from his face and said, "Keep moving." Deck by deck, the pirates fell back, their numbers crumbling under the relentless assault. For every cadet that faltered, Elias pulled another forward, his presence a fire that refused to die. Finally, they reached the command core. The pirate, captain, a towering brute clad in jagged armor, snarled as the intruders burst in. "You think one human frightens me?" he spat. Elias stepped forward, face grim. "Not yet." The fight was savage. Blades clashed, plasma seared the air. The captain swung with brute strength, but Elias fought with something else, desperation. He ducked low, drove his shoulder into the captain's gut, and planted an explosive on his armor. The captain staggered back, eyes wide. The explosion tore him apart, pieces of armor and flesh scattering across the deck. Silence followed. Elias turned to the cadets, eyes burning in the dim light. Now they'll remember what a human can do. Minutes later, the raider frigate drifted in flames, its hull splitting apart. Across the fleet, pirate captains barked retreat orders, their fear transmitted over open comms. The word carried farther than any weapon. Human. The galaxy had just been reminded. News traveled faster than ships. Before the fires on Crucible Station were even extinguished, before bodies were counted and corridors cleared of ash, whispers were already spreading across the stars. One human had turned a pirate fleet into wreckage. One human had led cadets into the jaws of death and returned with victory clenched in bloody fists. And the galaxy listened. On Dominion Prime, generals studied the battle feeds with their compound eyes, mandibles twitching in disbelief. Their culture prized order, structure, discipline, And yet the humans' chaos had carved through the pirates like a blade. On Shire homeworld, mathematicians ran models again and again, trying to quantify the unquantifiable. By every calculation, the cadets should have perished. Yet the human's unpredictability, his willingness to discard logic for instinct, had rewritten the outcome. On the Breaketh Forge worlds, warriors slammed their fists against steel walls, roaring approval. To them, Elias Ward was no cadet, he was kin. A predator among predators. Even the pirate networks, fractured, lawless, scattered across the void, whispered a single word in fear over their encrypted comms. Human. Back on Crucible, the station felt like a grave. Hull breaches sealed, fires smothered, but the air still stank of ozone and blood. Cadets limped through corridors, their eyes hollow, their youth burned away in hours of fire and screams. And everywhere Elias walked, silence followed. Some looked at him with awe, others with unease. To them, he was no longer just a man. He was a storm. Yet Elias himself looked unchanged, calm, almost detached. He ate in silence, patched his own wounds without complaint, and refused every medal the generals tried to press into his hands. "I didn't fight for glory," he said simply. "I fought because survival doesn't wait for permission." But his refusal only made the legend grow. The generals of Crucible argued behind sealed doors. If one human can do this, imagine an army of them. Or imagine if they cannot be controlled. They are a primitive species. This one is an anomaly. Then explain why his cadets fought like veterans under his command. They didn't notice Elias listening outside the chamber. He heard every word. He knew the truth. The galaxy wasn't trembling because of him alone. It was trembling because he had reminded them of something they'd chosen to forget. Humans weren't domesticated. They weren't contained. They weren't predictable. They were dangerous. Whispers turned into ripples. Ripples into waves. On border colonies, alien civilians spoke of humans in hushed tones, fearful and fascinated. Merchant guilds debated whether to blacklist Earth for safety or court it for protection. In pirate dens, leaders tightened their defenses, their paranoia rising. If one human could shatter a frigate, what would happen when the rest followed, even? In the distant halls of the Galactic Council, delegates shifted nervously. The name Elias Ward was spoken in the same breath as ancient human wars, conflicts the galaxy had chosen to bury in archives marked forbidden. The fear was spreading, faster than light. One night Elias stood alone on an observation deck staring into the endless void. Crucible floated like a wounded beast behind him, lights flickering in patched scars. Commander Threx, the Vakari drillmaster who had once dismissed him, approached in silence. His reptilian eyes glowed faintly in the dark. "You realize what you've done," Threx rumbled. Elias didn't turn. "I survived." "No." Threx's voice was heavy. "You reminded them." The galaxy had forgotten why Earth was left alone, why treaties marked it as off-limits, why no empire dared touch it. You've woken memories they buried for centuries. Elias finally looked at him, his gaze steady. "Good." Beyond the observation deck, the stars glittered cold and endless. Somewhere out there, empires trembled, pirates whispered, and warlords reconsidered old maps of human space. Because the day had come when one human reminded them all, and the galaxy would never forget. Again, the council chamber of Crucible Base had never been so silent. Representatives from 24 species crowded the room, their voices once sharp with arrogance, now muted with unease. The holographic table shimmered with tactical reports, casualty, lists, and fragmented recordings of the pirate slaughter. Every angle replayed the same impossible image, one human fighting like a force of nature. Elias Ward stood at the far end of the chamber, not on a pedestal, not decorated in medals, but leaning against the wall in torn cadet armor. His face was calm, his eyes unreadable. The room bristled with military brass, diplomats, and strategists, yet all of them avoided his gaze, as if looking too long might invite the same storm that had consumed the pirates. The sheer mathematician delegate broke the silence first, her voice brittle. This aberration must not be allowed to spread. If humanity acts without restraint— The Bracketh warchief slammed his clawed fist against the table, rattling data slates. Without restraint? That human showed more restraint than your fleets have in a century. He could have killed them all, and he did. Efficient, final. That is not chaos. That is survival at its purest. The Dominion general hissed, mandibles clicking. Survival is one thing. But this? One human boarded a warship with untrained cadets and left it in ruins. That is not survival. That is terror. What happens when the rest of his kind follow his example? A ripple of silence spread. None dared answer, except Elias. He stepped forward, his boots echoing in the chamber. His voice was steady, not raised, but every syllable carried. "You're afraid," he said, "not of me, not of what I did. You're afraid because I reminded you of the truth you buried." Alien eyes turned toward him, some wide, some narrowing. "You locked Earth away. You said it was for our protection, that humanity wasn't ready. For the galaxy, but that wasn't the reason. You remembered what we are, and you prayed the rest of the stars would forget." Elias let the silence stretch, the tension wound tight as steel. "But forgetting doesn't erase the truth. You wanted us docile, dependent, trained to follow rules written by those who've never had to fight for every scrap of air and soil. You thought you could keep humanity in a cage." His jaw tightened. His voice dropped lower. "You were wrong." The Bracketh warchief bared his fangs in something like a smile. The Dominion general recoiled. The sheer delegate lowered her gaze. But Elias wasn't finished. "You ask what happens when more humans follow my example? I'll tell you. The galaxy changes because you're right, I'm not special. I'm not stronger, faster, or smarter than the rest of my kind. I'm just the first you've seen. And there are billions more." The words hit the chamber like detonations. The truth was undeniable. If one human cadet could ignite fear across empires, what would happen when humanity stopped holding back? Elias turned away from the table, walking toward the exit. His last words hung like a shadow over them all. "You don't have to fear me, you have to fear what comes next." Later in the corridors of Crucible, cadets whispered his name like a talisman. Ward. The human. The one who made them tremble. Some spoke with awe, some with unease, but none with doubt. His legend had already escaped the station, carried on rumors, recordings, and survivor accounts. On pirate channels, his face became a warning. On military feeds, a study. On the streets of alien worlds, a ghost story parents told their children. Not because he was invincible, not because he was unstoppable, but because he had reminded them of the one truth no star empire could erase. Humans adapt. Humans endure. Humans fight like nothing else in the galaxy. And when pushed far enough, humans make the galaxy tremble. That night, Elias stood once more on the observation deck, staring into the dark. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't proud. He was simply waiting, knowing the galaxy would come, and when it did, he would be ready. Final moral, closing hook. Fear is not born from strength alone. It is born from the realization that what you thought was contained, forgotten, or broken has only just begun to rise.